My name's Brian Heffernan. I'm a member of the taxi charity for military veterans. Last summer, we visited 8 of these veterans of Operation Market Garden, which took place in September 1944. And these are their stories.
I'm Ron Johnson. I was called up 3 days before war started when I was in the Territorial Army. So at that stage, I was nearing my 18th birthday and called up on the 1st of September. War was declared on the 3rd of September. And, well, that was the strange part of it, being called up like that and being taken up to Norfolk, where we were under canvas, and then we were moved out to a farm, Scarning, in near East Dereham, where we were on searchlight sites. Although we were an infantry regiment, we were put onto searchlights, and that was quite an interesting time. An ex-grammar school boy, I think I was the only one in the particular unit, so they sent me off on all sorts of courses. If there's a gas instructor's course, I was on that. Aircraft recognition training, I was off on that. And in doing that on the aircraft recognition instructor's course, I came out top with 100%. And there were 2 glider pilot captains were running this course, and I don't know what it was, but they spotted in me something that ought to be developed. So they sent me on from there to pre-octu, an octu to become an officer training unit, in other words. So I didn't ever go back to my regiment. I was commissioned and was a second lieutenant in the Essex Regiment. And then immediately on call-up, they were desperately looking for people to be trained as glider pilots. They needed them for D-Day, which was coming. They knew was coming along. Well, I knew that I could get through the Aircrew Selection Board because I'd already done that in 1942 to transfer to the Royal Air Force. But they decided to stop all transfers, so I didn't go. But anyway, I was called up fairly quickly to be trained as a glider pilot, but they wanted us in such a hurry that we could only do the short course and be what is known as co-pilots. So I was a co-pilot, and despite being ready for D-Day, they didn't need me, so I didn't go. But soon after that, various operations came about. 13 operations were cancelled between then and September, but in September came the airborne landings that were planned for Holland in the Arnhem, Oosterbeek area. I flew in on the second day in a Horsa glider. We took a jeep and 2 trailers with 4 people from the REME, that's Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. And we also had a fold-up bicycle with us in the glider, I remember. Takeoff and everything went very, very smoothly. We passed over Hatfield, over to the coast at Aldborough. We flew over the North Sea in 2 streams, so that as far as your eye could see in these 2 streams of aircraft and gliders, I would say would think it stretched probably for 100 miles. You could see the 2 streams ahead. And I remember flying over the North Sea and looking down and see a glider down there in the water that had obviously been in trouble and had to ditch, but it ditched safely and was down on the sea. We flew over the coast and then into I remember particularly well, the turning point at Hertogenbosch. So that then I knew when we got to Hertogenbosch we were going to do the journey we were sent to do. We were not going to be shot down on the way by ACAC. We were not going to be hit by enemy aircraft. That we really were going in to land and do the job, which happened just like that. Turn at Hertogenbosch, straight down, just like an exercise to where we were supposed to land. All went very well indeed. We got our jeep and trailer out, and we rode with the REME people into Wolfhazen, where they went on their way and we dropped off and joined our E Squadron out on the heathland at Wolfhazen. On the Tuesday morning, we were out on this heathland, and ME 109 came over and shot us up. And I've understood that it killed 2 glider pilots, two of my colleagues. And not long after that, on that same day, was when the resupply came in, and the aircraft flying in, I would think at about 2,500 feet. And there was one plane going round on fire. It dropped part of its load, and he went round again on fire and continued to drop its load. I remember saying to my section, my troops, my glider pilots, I remember saying to them that if he could do that for us up there, we've got to put our backs into it down here. And I found out later that the pilot concerned, who won the Victoria Cross posthumously, was Flight Lieutenant Lord, who I knew as a friend in the officers' mess back in England, and I had respected him very much because he'd already got the DFC Distinguished Flying Cross before then. What was remarkable about it was that Flight Lieutenant Lord, going around again on fire, sacrificed himself because he thought we needed those supplies on the ground and he was going to get them down to us. So he wanted to make sure that we got all the supplies that he got on board. And in that way, he lost his life, posthumous VC. I remember now particularly Tuesday, I landed on the Monday, the second day on Tuesday night. The house opposite my end trench was completely on fire, and a young lady came out from the house, and she called out, could she come across to our position? And I called out loud as I could, stop firing, you know, to try to get everybody's attention. And then I called out to this young lady, yes, you can come across now. And as she got halfway across the road, a machine gun opened up and shot her down. And she was lying there in the road, and well, having told her, given her freedom to come across, you've got to do something about it. So I yelled out again at the top of my voice, stop firing, stop firing. And then I went out to pick her up and got her in my arms and brought her back to our position and handed over to Des Page, one of my sergeants who I know looked after her, and I understand that he provided some morphine for her and took her to a dressing station. But that was a really sad incident for that to happen. What they'd done, they shot part of her foot away, and we tried many times afterwards to find this young lady to apologise, but we didn't ever manage to do that. I've no idea whose machine gun it was, but in the light of battle at night, you can't know, and they couldn't, seeing someone moving about, they couldn't tell who it was either. So, you know, they may have fired by design, or it may have been by accident. They saw someone thought it was enemy troops and so on. Anyway, she was injured, unfortunately. I was at the end trench of my standing by the end trench of my section, and suddenly a half-track vehicle came right up to my position, and in the half-track, guiding it, was the leader of the half-track. So he was standing out on top, giving directions, and without giving any thought about it, I just drew my revolver and shot him. Well, you wouldn't expect you were going to do anything like that with a revolver, but he killed this guy, and they had to pull him on one side so they could get out their half-track, because they've got nobody directing them to show them the way. So they had to pull him aside, and the other three got out, and I understand that they were killed by people in the King's Own Scottish borders as they tried to get away. So that happened right by our position. I wasn't feared that was going to happen to me. The only thought that I had that I was hoping that I didn't let myself, as a young lieutenant, I didn't let myself down in front of my own troops. And that was not a consuming thought, but a thought. You know, I wanted to do the job to the best of my ability, and afterwards I could say that I did. Do you understand me? Yeah, you know, I'd done as well as I could do. Wednesday, I was injured first of all by a mortar bomb, which landed on the top ground. Rather landed in the trench next to mine and killed the two people from the Kingsland Scottish Borders right in it, because it fell right in their trench. If it had fallen on top, it had killed me, but it landed in their trench and killed them. And I had all bits and pieces and stuff in my head, so my face was bleeding away and a bit of a mess. So I went across to the first aid post, where they spent about an hour taking all the stuff out of my head and so on, and cleaning it up, and they put my head in bandages which were not white bandages, but the colour for battle. So my eyes were free and my mouth was free, and the rest was bandaged. And I must have still been a bit concussed, because I remember going back to my trench, getting in my trench and thinking, well, I'll stay here for a while. And then I thought, well, I better just have a look in the next trench to see that there is no sign of life in there. Idiot. I got out of my trench and a sniper picked me off and put a bullet through my back. So I had a bullet go drill through the middle of my back, and it came out through the arm and made a great big hole in my arm, which I got the scar today. And I went back to the dressing station, and the chaps in there said, "Oh no, not you again. We just spent an hour picking stuff out of you. We don't want you." So anyway, they dressed me up and sent me to put me in a first aid jeep, which took me to the Hartenstein, which you know, don't you? Hartenstein Hotel, which is a museum now. And in there was a Dr. Randall. He was a lieutenant. Unusually for army doctors, they were usually captains or above, but he was a lieutenant still, about my age. And I was rather fortunate. I managed to talk to him in latter years, just before he died. He became a brain surgeon in Sheffield. Really nice chap, Dr. Randall. So he dressed me and said, "All right, you're on your way now, you're out of action now." And they took me from there to, as I say, the Hartenstein, and from the Hartenstein to Tafelberg, Hotel Tafelberg, which had been taken over as the hotel had been taken over to be a temporary hospital. I remember there, all these memories come back now, you're asking me. I remember there having a bed for the first night. On the second night, because there were people who were more wounded than I was, I had a place on the floor. On the third night, that was the, thinking now, that was the Saturday night, I think it was, I had a place on the stairs of this hotel. I was thinking, oh dear me, all head in bandages, arm in a sling, one step on the stairs. Germans overran that hotel, took it over, so they took us away in trucks to Apeldoorn, the barracks at Apeldoorn, which were just north of Arnhem. And I was in Apeldoorn for 3 days. And then they loaded us onto the infamous cattle trucks. Supposed to be wounded, supposed to be a hospital train. They were cattle trucks with dirty straw on the floor. And we were locked in those cattle trucks for 4 days and 3 nights, taken into Germany. And I was told afterwards that the Red Cross told them that was against the Geneva Convention. They were not allowed to do that, and don't you do that again. And apparently that's what happened. They didn't do it again, but we were in the taken away these cattle trucks into into Germany. And I was taken first of all to Fallingbostel, and I had about I think it was 3 days I was in there, and then we moved with 6 other glider pilots to a castle like Colditz, but not Colditz. It was a castle called Spangenberg, and we spent from September 44 round till April 45 in Spangenberg, where there were some very distinguished people in there, including Colonel Newman, who won the Victoria Cross. So we had some prominent people there. They moved us in April 1945, wanted to hold on to us as captives as long as they could. So they started moving us east, and I knew we were going east, we were going towards the Russians. So I didn't like that very much. So with another glider pilot, Bob Garnett, we took the opportunity when we were put in a barn one night to sneak off in the night and to get away and hide ourselves up in the hills. So we hid in the hills for 8 days till we knew the Americans were coming along. So we had a few biscuits and some water from cart tracks to drink, which you can imagine was not the greatest of things. So we were there for about 8 days. It was 8 days, 7 nights, 8 days, till the Americans came along, and then where we knew it was the Americans because of the orderly movement and so on, we went down and moved there and joined the Americans. They put us in the house for one night, and we fed us and had a bath and looked after us. And the next morning they said, well, we've still got a battle to fight. So they said, you're on your own. And we managed to get a lift on a French foreign workers truck to the airfield at Eschwege, where Americans that had been flying in Dakota, been flying in gasoline, picked us up and took us back to Paris. They put us in a hotel in Paris for the night. And I remember particularly the others going out of the town. I said, no, I haven't slept for all this time in this bush, or hardly slept, so please give me an injection and put me to sleep, which the doctor did. The next morning they had a job to wake me up. From there, we went down by train to the coast, and they flew over Dakotas to pick us up at the coast and take us back to England. Then we're in England and sent off on some leave then. Well, I stayed on in the army. I took a short service regular commission, so I stayed on for another 6 years in the Glider Pilot Regiment, and I enjoyed army. Well, you see, the army was my education. The army was my university. I went in as a 17, nearly 18-year-old, fairly callow youth, and I came out at that stage quite a trained, knowledgeable person. It had taught me leadership, it had taught me discipline, it had taught me administration, law, so many things that you learn in the army, particularly if you're commissioned. It was just really like a university for me, and always has been. One wonderful help to me all my life. I've got to think about that question because I didn't ever particularly regard myself as a hero. I just did the job that was to be done. You know, you do it to your best of your ability. And as I said earlier, I hope you're not going to let yourself down in front of your own men and sergeants. I take it more that way than thinking that I'm a hero. I always loved talking to the children, and I was asked on one occasion to talk to them at a school in Arnhem, and I put on the blackboard and had my hostess put it into Dutch, saying, "We are free, and we love one another." So I said to the children, I remember this so distinctly, saying, "Well, why is it important to remember we are free?" because your mother and father and the people here were not free. They were under the jackboot of the Nazis, and but for the action of a lot of brave people, many of them lost their lives, we wouldn't be free. So value your freedom, we are free. And why is it important to love one another? Because if we do remember to love one another, as we've been taught, then we'll have no more of these struggles and wars. Remember talking to children like that. It's always stayed in my mind. We are free and we love one another.